Elias stepped straight into the aisle. The entire hall seemed to slow, the ambient hum of the obsidian nexus dimming, as if the station itself wanted to watch him make a fatal mistake. He pointed directly at the sovereign's sacred dish, his voice carrying over the dead silence. "Don't eat that." How exactly does a junior human delegate end up accusing an alien empire of assassinating their own empress? 2 hours ago, his greatest political crisis had been the persistent, slightly too tight pinch of his formal collar. He hadn't expected to be auditing an execution. The Unity Hall of the Obsidian Nexus was a vast bowl of dark glass and starlight. Tables hovered in concentric rings, suspended by field anchors that vibrated just below the threshold of human hearing. The artificial gravity of the Nexus always felt heavy to human bones, dragging at his shoulders. Around him, diplomats from a dozen systems performed their practice smiles, their eyes doing frantic arithmetic on trade routes and alliances. Elias Thorne sat near the outer edge of the delegation seating, trying to look like a man who enjoyed diplomatic pantomime. Then Empress Vailia entered. She didn't walk so much as let the room arrange itself around her. Her robes shifted between indigo and absolute black, woven from fibers that seemed to drink the ambient light. Her guards, the Aegis Phalanx, moved with her. They didn't glare. They didn't posture. Their stillness was a threat all on its own. The rites began. Elias nodded at the correct intervals, keeping his expression carefully blank. "You should have just ordered the CAF." And a low ceremonial tone rolled through the hall. Conversation softened into nothing. A drone orbited the Empress's table, projecting a delicate privacy veil. Attendants arranged the initial courses. This was the crucible of renewal, a sacred feast built on 1,000 years of unbending tradition and a flawless chain of custody. Every spoon, every plate, every vapor was supposed to be logged and verified by the highest levels of the bureaucracy. A solitary server approached the center dais. The Nexus cupbearer. The server carried a single plate resting on a levitation pad. A clear crystal dome covered the dish, trapping golden steam that spun in lazy, mechanical spirals. It was a beautiful display of culinary mathematics. "Wait." Elias leaned forward, the synthetic fabric of his suit pulling taut against his back. Across the polished floor, the cupbearer's step faltered. It was just a fraction of a millimeter, a tiny hesitation, but it was enough to make the levitation pad dip and correct itself. As the servant drew closer to the harsh light of the dais, Elias noticed the ceremonial wristband clamped over the alien's forearm. It sat too tight. It was digging into the skin, causing the muscles underneath to twitch in rapid, involuntary spasms. Along the rim of the crystal dome, a faint, iridescent shimmer caught the chandelier's glow. It was an oily refraction, too chaotic to be part of the presentation. Elias inhaled carefully through his nose. Beneath the heavy, spiced perfume of the hall, there was a secondary scent. It was sharp. It smelled exactly like the inside of a ruptured power cell. His pulse hammered against his tight collar. Paralyzing fear gripped his chest. Disrupting the crucible of renewal meant immediate arrest, a diplomatic disaster, and potentially a quiet disappearance out an airlock. The rules of a Nexus were absolute, but the Empress raised her hand, graceful and unhurried, ready to accept the offering. The cupbearer's fingers visibly trembled as they reached to lift the crystal dome. Elias felt the adrenaline spike. The terror of breaking protocol washed away, replaced instantly by cold, unthinking instinct. He pushed his chair back. It emitted a soft, wounded mechanical sigh. Elias's chair emitted a soft, mechanical groan as he stepped fully into the aisle, the golden steam of the crucible surging upward just as his voice cracked the heavy silence. The Empress's hand froze a fraction of an inch from the dish. Her dark, fathomless eyes snapped to him. She did not look offended. She looked calculating. Before another diplomat could even gasp, an Aegis Phalanx guard materialized beside the cupbearer. A swift pass of a diagnostic scanner illuminated the crystal dome in blinding ultraviolet. The iridescent film flared. The neurovascular disruptor was undeniable. The Unity Hall dissolved into a blur of controlled panic, but Elias was already gone. He was flanked by silent guards and ushered into a sterile, hermetically sealed holding suite deep within the inner ring. Empress Veilia arrived minutes later, dismissing her escort with a sharp flick of her wrist. She deployed a sensory recall interface, a floating silver pedal that extracted the exact chemical memory of the scent and the shimmer right out of Elias's adrenaline-soaked brain. The data scrolled across a holographic display. The toxin's origin was unmistakable. It traced directly back to the Nexus's restricted internal biolabs. Then the suite's lighting shifted to a harsh, blood-red emergency hue. An automated klaxon overrode the station's gentle hum. Someone had breached the secure ring. The Aegis phalanx formed a protective wedge around the Empress and Elias, diverting them down a secondary access route. The faint hum of the climate control vents in the otherwise silent maintenance corridor felt unnervingly normal against the backdrop of an active assassination plot. Elias kept his back to the wall, his breath catching in his chest. If the security grid was actually locked down, then how did... A wall panel ruptured outward. A masked figure in maintenance gray dropped from the access tunnel, scrambling for the primary service duct. Elias lunged. It wasn't bravery. It was pure, unthinking momentum. He slammed into the saboteur, crushing them both against the grated flooring. A sharp, icy sting bit deep into Elias's forearm. A localized nanostructure tracker. He didn't let go. Elias's fingers locked around the saboteur's wrist, wrapping directly over the tight ceremonial band. The saboteur twisted violently, driving a knee into Elias's ribs, but the human's grip held. The heavy synthetic fabric of the band snapped under the pressure. The intruder slipped free, diving into the dark duct and vanishing, leaving Elias gasping on the cold floor with the torn piece of uniform clutched in his fist. The Empress stared at the severed band. It carried a microscopic, encrypted administrative seal. They didn't run. They waited. The snare was set. Grand Chancellor Morvith arrived swiftly with a contingent of his own security, his robes pristine. He demanded to take custody of the human who had so recklessly disrupted the sacred chain of custody. He looked at Elias with polite, measured disdain, completely unaware of the trap. The station's artificial intelligence did not possess a tone of voice that conveyed shock, but the way it read out the biometric match between Morvith's diplomatic seal and the saboteur's torn wristband carried the distinct, chilling weight of an empire realizing its own heart was rotting. Morvith's posture stiffened, his rigid composure shattering as the Aegis guards boxed him in. Elias stood alone near the observation glass, the puncture wound on his arm, throbbing in time with his pulse. He turned the torn ceremonial wristband over in his hands. It was no longer a symbol of ancient authority or flawless tradition. It was just a broken piece of evidence, heavy with the terrifying fragility of an empire.